Hey, it's me, Goku!
Die of Death has finally released its Overhaul update, and it changed basically everything about the game. All of the civilian abilities received balancing changes, and a few of them even received complete reworks, and the same goes for the killers. All of the maps were completely redone, and 3 new ones were added as well, but 2 of those maps are a little different than the rest, which is something I'll get into later. They also added a new cosmetic system, along with a gameplay ranking system, a library that gives extra details about many different things in the game, 4 civilian abilities, 2 civilian ability synergies, and 2 special round game modes. Basically, pretty much everything was changed in this update, and this is almost a completely different game now. Now, I've already talked about my gripes with huge updates such as this in a previous video, so today I want to give some of my thoughts about the contents of this update and what I think was improved or worsened. I'll try to keep this video more on the brief side because this is merely just a first impressions video, and I still need more experience with this update, so my opinions stated in this video may change later down the line. I might also say things that are inaccurate or straight up false due to my lack of experience with this update, so feel free to let me know in the comments if I get something wrong. If you couldn't tell by watching my previous video, I had a lot of fun with this update, and I can say with certainty that it was worth the wait. Not to say that the wait for this update should have been nearly as long as it was, but it's still a really good update nonetheless. It's very clear to me that Sasafai and his team really cared about this update and wanted it to be as good as they could make it. I think the best proof of this is how much the game has visually improved with this update. Not only did most of the game mechanics receive changes and overhauls, but so did almost all of the visuals as well. All of the UI has been completely reworked, the maps and even the lobby have all changed, and most of the visual effects have been remade too. A lot of the character animations that were already in the game didn't change as far as I can tell, but even so, this update looks absolutely stunning, and it's clear that there was a lot of effort being put into making this game's art direction stick out from other ASIMs even more than it already did prior to this update. The maps all look really good in this update. They're all incredibly detailed and have a lot of nuance to them aesthetically. These maps have a lot of props on them, but they never really get in your way, and they actually have a reason to be where they are, rather than just being scattered around the map seemingly randomly. I will admit some of the maps do have a noticeable visual clutter problem, but the amount of care put into these maps still shouldn't be ignored. Although I do have to say that they kind of got carried away with the visuals of this update in some areas. Everything looks extremely well polished now, but there are some things that are completely unnecessary, especially with the special LMSs. This update made it to where every special LMS has a bunch of pointless visual effects that do nothing but obstruct your view. Pretty much every special LMS now randomly has the screen flash or images that appear out of nowhere for no good reason at all. I'm sorry, but I just find it annoying when a banana and a brick wall are bouncing on the sides of my screen for literally no reason, or when an image of a caretaker's bottle slowly fades into the screen while also darkening everything around it. Again, this update looks amazing, but there are some details that are completely unneeded and only get in the way. Thankfully, Sasafai bothered to make a proper settings menu this update, so you can just disable these effects, but it still seems like a strange decision to spend time adding these unnecessary visual effects to almost every special LMS to me. But at least the settings menu doesn't suck anymore and actually has volume sliders now. Anyways, let's focus on how more integral parts of the game were changed now. A major complaint I had with Die of Death before this update was how weak the killers were. The killers were really slow and were only slightly faster than the civilians. And the civilians had insanely powerful abilities at their disposal like bonus pad or care pad. Looping the killer was absurdly easy to do as a civilian, and bonus pad only made already powerful loops even more potent. But with this update, I can safely say that this game is a lot closer to being fair for both sides, because every killer has gotten faster in this update. Harkin was the most commonly looped killer in the game before this update came out, because she only had a base sprinting speed of 26.5, but now she doesn't get looped nearly as often, as she now has a base sprinting speed of 27.25, and one of her abilities, Agitation, is much better at cutting off loops. Anyways, the killers are all faster now. But what's more important is the fact that they all received pretty major changes to their kits, except for Artful. I have to say that Pursuer and Harkin are incredibly fun to play as and against now, especially Harkin, who received easily the most changes to her kit. I already liked Harkin's concept before this update, and she was my main, but I just didn't like how susceptible she was to looping outside of Rage mode and how weak her abilities felt at times. But this update's rework for her has made her so much more enjoyable to play as and against due to her actually being quick enough to be a threat outside of Rage mode and being able to cut off loops with Agitation. Her Rage mode is way more interesting now too, because her abilities are actually different when she's enraged, and she can go into Rage mode at will now too. Pursuer isn't exactly the strongest killer still, but his gameplay is way more refreshing because the ability that ties his whole kit together, Stalk, isn't just a chase starter with loads of end lag, and now he can actually surprise attack civilians while invisible. This makes it to where you actually have to pay attention to what Pursuer's doing again, because before this update he had so much end lag on all of his moves, and he was generally just slow, so he didn't feel like a threat. But now you actually have to pay attention when he uses Stalk, because if you don't, you'll take unnecessary damage you could have avoided. However, the other two killer reworks are very questionable in my opinion. Badware and Killdroid are honestly so overpowered right now, it's actually insane. I know that I was heavily advocating for this game to be less survivor-sided before this update came out, but what they did with Badware and Killdroid was way too much. Badware was a really boring killer for both parties originally, mainly because he relied entirely on camping by his computers so the civilians couldn't destroy them. But now, the civilians can no longer destroy Badware's computers. However, to compensate, Badware can only place 4 computers now, and the computers also slowly dissipate over time unless Badware deals damage to a civilian, which will then cause all of the computers they currently have placed down to regenerate some health. The problem is that Badware's Bolt ability is stupidly strong now, because not only does it make you charge forward way faster when inside the radius of a computer, but it also consistently does 20 damage when outside the radius of a computer and 25 damage when inside the radius of a computer. Bolt used to be this potentially really strong ability that you had to build up over time, because by default it only did 10 damage, but it would do 5 more damage with every computer placed down at a time. But now that concept is completely gone, and Bolt has become basically a completely brain dead ability that was already way too generous with how easily you can steer while charging. Killdroid is currently one of the most broken killers I've ever seen in any ASIM. Not only do his missiles seem faster, but his killbots can also fire at you now, and he can place 4 of them at a time. This means that Killdroid makes traversing any map in the game a living nightmare, since you have to dodge a billion different missiles just to get to your team. And don't even think about using your abilities in their range, because you'll just get bombed into oblivion. And don't even get me started on how absolutely insufferable these things are when Killdroid is actively chasing you. Not only that, but Killdroid can be completely stationary while flying, and he generally has way more control over his movement while airborne, which was absolutely not something that needed to be changed. And it doesn't stop there, because he also has an ability called Propel now, which allows him to leap into the air for a second before slamming into the ground and dealing 25 damage in a moderately sized radius. He can also use this ability while flying. Trying to avoid Propel, especially when the Killdroid uses it while they're flying, is like trying to outrun the speed of light while also not having any legs at all. This ability is completely unfair because it happens so quickly and you have barely any time to get out of the way or react in the first place. And it wouldn't be as bad if it didn't do the same amount of damage as Killdroid's M1 while also ragdolling anybody hit by it. Killdroid is fun to play as, but I absolutely loathe playing against against him mainly because of his kill bots. But enough about the killers, let's focus on the civilians now. There were 4 new civilian abilities added with this update, and 5 civilian abilities were also reworked. I think all of the ability reworks took a step in the right direction with this update, and some of them even made previously useless abilities actually viable. Adrenaline's rework is by far my favorite out of the 5. Being able to actually help your team with this ability by speeding up any civilians in a small radius around you makes this ability way more engaging and actually useful. Hot Dog's rework honestly just feels like a buff overall, because instead of trading max stamina for a self heal and more max health, your hurt box size increases every time you use the ability, which means it's easier for attacks to hit you. Bonus pad is way more balanced now since the killer can actually destroy the pad now, but I do think it's a little too fragile since most killer M1s can deal with it in one hit. Dash is also much more engaging and useful now. Being able to knock the killer back is really helpful for last second saves or knocking the killer into a stun or a trap. It also can't be used as free distance on the killer when you're low on stamina, because if you don't have enough stamina for Dash's stamina cost, you'll lose all of your momentum and ragdoll for a second or two. Taunt is just a really infuriating ability for the killer now, because it's much harder to react to now, and it ragdolls them for a few seconds. The new abilities, however, are a mixed bag, and I really don't know how to feel about them. While most of them have good concepts, they're kind of just poorly executed. Pie is an ability made to slow down the killer and impair their vision, but it's really hard to aim it properly because you have to hold down space to increase how far you throw it. And even though it travels in an arc, throwing it over stuff is really hard to pull off just because of the cumbersome controls. It also just doesn't slow down the killer that much and doesn't mess with their vision that badly. Bugle can be a really strong ability that doubles the speed of the team's cooldowns, but it has these annoying skill checks where you have to press the right key at the right time. You have to do 4 of these in order for the full effect to be applied, which really sucks because not only are you very vulnerable during this duration because it's long, but also because you have to take your fingers off your movement keys to hit the right keys for the skill checks. I absolutely hate the skill checks, not because they're hard, but because they're just annoying and I hate dealing with them every time I go to use the ability. Flashlight can also be helpful, but its hitbox is really janky, and if the killer just gets closer to you, there's a high chance they just won't get affected by the flashlight at all because the hitbox of the light is exceptionally janky, even for this game. And reroll just exists. I really don't see the point of this ability when you could just pick an actual ability and play a way more consistent role for your team rather than jumping around with how you provide help for your team and not being able to play a certain role when your team needs it the most. Also, having to put yourself at risk by rerolling after using your temporary ability due to the end lag is not worth being a less consistent teammate at all. The new map layouts are fine, I guess. They're certainly a lot better than they were before, but some of them still have dead ends, which is confusing to me. The 2 new special game modes, Golf and Fry Bomber, are honestly really annoying and don't fit into this game at all. If Saucify wants to make an Epic Minigames clone, he should make a separate game and not infest Die of Death with game modes that have no correlation with the actual gameplay loop. And Evil Scary's rework just makes the mode even more annoying than it already was because of how he leaps around the map. But at least he doesn't instantly kill civilians anymore, so that's nice. Anyways, to conclude, I really like this update, and there's so many things I love about it, but there's so many things I also really dislike about it. This update looks amazing, but gets carried away with the visuals at times. The killers actually feel like the power roll again, but they're too strong now, especially Badware and Killdroid. The killers are also just missing the major weaknesses their kits had before, like how Pursuer's Stalk is really hard to punish now due to the stun immunity he gets during its windup, and how he can ambush civilians with very little end lag. Artful has a small splash radius around him when he places a wall, so it's more difficult to punish him with punch. Harkin has Pummel now, which is an absurdly busted move that does double the damage of her enraged M1, while also having a projectile afterwards that reels singles civilians in if she misses the initial attack. Badware's bolt is basically a guaranteed hit now, and its damage output isn't affected by his number of computers, and Killdroid is literally Hitler if he was a robot, and he sucks to play against in every way, mainly because of his killbots. Besides Pummel's existence, Harkin's rework was the one I found to be the most enjoyable for both sides, and it didn't just feel like a removal of all her former weaknesses. I need people to understand that I thought killers were weak before this update because they were slow, not because their abilities were bad. But now the devs have buffed their speed and abilities, so the game kind of feels a little too killer-sided now, which is not something I thought I would ever say. The ability reworks are all amazing, but the new abilities are just kind of underwhelming and aren't really that fun to use currently, except for Flashlight when its hitbox works properly. Speaking of hitboxes, I know they recoded the hitboxes this update, but they only feel worse than they did before. I don't even need to show you proof of this because you can literally play a match right now, and even with good ping you'll most likely feel how poorly coded they are, but I will anyway.
Now, it's time to bust a nut. Oh my god. We are all gonna bust a nut.
Overall, this update is great, but it still has many problems. Thankfully, the devs have been working very hard even after releasing the update to iron out some of the problems, and they're making balancing patches very frequently. So I'm glad they actually care what the community has to say. But I still hope that many more changes in the near future are made, because currently this game really needs them. And I'd hate to say that because I wanted to view this update as an almost perfect overhaul, but sadly it has quite a handful of issues, while still being a great update however. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.